What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with podcast number 27 of 33 of our 2023-2024 NBA preview series. We are on to the Golden State Warriors look ahead. You know what that means. I believe this is year 4 of him agreeing to come back on and do this. We're talking to Sam Ascendiari, the co-host of the internationally famous Light Years podcast at this point. I just feel like I see and hear you guys everywhere, even if it's not necessarily in my podcast feed. Sam, thank you for coming back, and how are you doing?
I'm good. I love our yearly check-in, preseason check-in, where I generally have an optimistic tone. I don't know. I've kind of like listened back and just listened to some of my old stuff. I definitely am like the old guy who's just excited during spring training baseball. Like nothing can go wrong. You can't break my vibe. And then, they start playing and either the season goes well or it doesn't. But today, everything's perfect.
Look, the training camp mindset impacts everybody. When I do over-unders, I'm like, I have to pull back wins from everyone because I just think everyone's going to hit their over.
25 teams are not winning 50 games.
Yeah. Right. I am a little surprised because you were able to talk yourself and then attempt to talk Andy and then attempt to talk your listeners into the CP3 stuff like before the games ever happened. I'm not going to lie. You going that route actually did surprise me.
You know what? Part of it was just a reaction to last year. Last year was such a miserable year, and we can trace it all back to the punch. It was nice to see the Warriors just go to a new chapter. And the way I look at the Chris Paul thing is 1 year could be traded midseason, quite frankly. They've used the word optionality an obnoxious amount of times all offseason. I don't know. It's like they officially are throwing away 2 timelines as a motto, and they're like, you know what? Steph's still one of the best players in the league. We can win a title. Let's worry about the future. In the future, is Chris Paul the perfect fit? No, but he does do certain things that can help the team. And if it's weird, we can trade him at the deadline anyway, because everyone always wants an expiring contract. I don't know. I didn't think that Jordan Poole, 4 years, $123 million off of the season he had was going to be very movable. So when they were able to get him for like, an older but still steady backup point guard type, like I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and I want to get into the Chris Paul stuff, but it's just like it cost you basically, I call it a fake first rounder, and then Patrick Baldwin's out, and there was a second in there, and it's like it wasn't even necessarily unless you believe that Jordan Poole was actually a bridge into the next timeline, which I don't think he was. It doesn't even feel like it was it's mega urgency. It's just this kind of made functional sense if you wanted to be a better basketball team.
Yeah, and it's like, look, I think Jordan Poole is better than he was last year. Like I think the player he was 2 years ago is probably a better barometer of who he is as a player than the one who was really frustrating last year and went through just obscene shooting slumps for stretches of time. But I don't think I don't think this is OKC trading James Harden. No. And, I think he's going to have a nice long career, but that whole thing wasn't working. And end of the day, Steph Curry is the greatest player in franchise history. And I have a very hard time imagining they'll ever get a player better than Steph Curry in my lifetime. You kind of just go for it. It wasn't working. On to the next one. Lean into vets. Lean into trying to be Spursy and just kind of see if you can, if you can pull one more title out of this core.
Before going a little bit deeper into the CP3 stuff, what is there? We know the punch, but is there anything else that you can illuminate on what went wrong last year? Were the vibes that like even breaking down to their road defensive splits? It's just like everything was some of the injuries as well. Everything about this team was such an inconsistent slog. But is there anything you can shine on what actually went wrong last season?
And the punch was the manifestation for too many competing agendas on that team. Jordan, everyone thinks it's about Draymond and Jordan Poole, and on some level it is. But it was more about Klay and Jordan Poole. He could not get over the fact that he wasn't the starter. He thought he was better than Klay. He might have been at some points, but Steve wanted seniority and you just kind of wanted him to buy in. I tend to think if Jordan Poole bought into playing defense, he might have just made him a starter and told Klay to come off the bench.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's true, to be honest, but I think the coaching staff was like, we're not just going to start you to start you. You got to like kind of earn it, quote unquote. And he thought he already had. There was the James Wiseman thing where they cleared minutes for him and he just clearly was unuseful. The coaching staff didn't want to play him. The front office kind of wanted him to play. Jonathan Kuminga is another player who thought he earned more minutes than he wanted. I mean, if you looked at the roster they had last year, you had the bones of the team that won the title the year prior, Steph, Klay, Draymond, you could throw Looney, Wiggins, a few other guys into there. And then all guys who are young wanting to prove themselves, not win. So it was the 2 timeline thing. It didn't get them the year before, but the year before they really only had 3 young guys. They didn't lean in this way. Like they had Otto Porter, not Patrick Baldwin. Right. I'm not even saying Patrick Baldwin wasn't even a problem, but he's a 19-year-old rookie. Like he's more deer in headlights in the locker room than anything, right? Andre Iguodala didn't play all year. That's the guy you thought could be a veteran helping the bench. JaMychal Green, who you signed, not that guy. Like the whole thing disintegrated into individual agendas is the way I would put it.
What I found interesting, and this happened a lot of it with Ayton and Phoenix, like to compare it to the Poole situation. I always just assume it's like that Mad Men line. That's what the money's for. Right. If you're not happy with your own. Obviously, Jonathan Kuminga wants his next contract. Moses Moody does. So I was a little surprised, even after the punch, that shit went so sideways with Jordan Poole. I actually thought it was going to be fun. It was like, oh, he got his contract. And I said the same thing with Ayton. I was like, they're paid now. Like, role doesn't matter. I was clearly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Poole wants to be an all-star. And you know what? Like, I think he could. I don't, if you ask me, is he going to be an all-star this year? Probably not. But it would not surprise me. He's only 24. It would not surprise me if he turned himself into an all-star. That was never going to happen coming off the bench for the Warriors. That sort of thing, right? And I feel like the punch is kind of the manifestation of know your place, type of thing. So, and Ayton's wired the same way in the sense of Ayton has this idea of how he wants to play and felt like he was held back a little bit. So sometimes it's not always about the money, sometimes it's about wanting to prove you can do something. And that's why young teams don't win titles. That's why they're filled with veteran guys. They're filled with like Dario Saric types who's been around the block. And he's like, oh, this is a team where I know exactly what my role. I can help this team this way. I'm not out here like saying I need the ball to prove I can score 20. I know I'm not that guy, right?
So the Chris Paul move was, and I think because it happened so early, but because of what it represented for Jordan Poole and then what CP3 means to the Warriors fan base, it got lost in the Dame stuff, even in the Harden stuff, in whatever the Celtics are fucking doing.
It feels like 4 seasons ago.
Yeah, it was, though, the single most polarizing moves of the offseason, I think. Like, I know there's other interesting stuff. So to start here, what have been your general impressions now that we're into training camp in the preseason of the CP3 experience so far?
Everything positive so far. I'm honestly curious to see what happens when Draymond actually comes back from injury, not because I think they're going to clash, although they absolutely could, but mostly because, okay, no Draymond in camp. We're just going to let Chris start. We don't have to work through any of that uneasy tension. And he's, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's professional, like shocker. He knows how to play basketball, even though he's older. He knows how to help his teammates. The young guys like him, the veterans like working with him. Like that stuff doesn't surprise me. It's just like positive to see it. I don't think we can really learn anything until he comes off the bench. And I do think that's where Steve's going to land with this. I think my prediction is Steve Kerr is going to rotate the main 6 guys more than you think. It's not going to be as much of a set starting lineup. He may bring Draymond off the bench a little bit and start small with Chris Paul. He may bring Klay
matchup thing.
Yeah, he may bring Klay off the bench or Looney off the bench at times too, just to make all those guys, realize like, hey, you're all on equal footing. You're clearly the main guys, but someone has to come off the bench every now and then,
What do you think? What are you most intrigued by, aside from we all know what he might be able to do for them during the non-Steph minutes? What most intrigues you about his fit and what he can do for this team?
Well, the non-Steph minutes are number 1. You already alluded to that. The number 2 would be him next to Steph with Draymond off the floor. It's pretty intriguing because how many players has Steph played with who can actually dribble a basketball?
Oh shit.
You know what I'm saying? It's like they get Kevin Durant and everyone's like, this is unfair, but like every other Warrior team it's kind of filled with dudes who are smart and long, but not necessarily guys who can create their own shot. Right.
Right.
And, Jordan Poole, when he was going, they were unstoppable together because now you have that second shot creator next to him. But Jordan Poole is inconsistent with regards to playmaking. Chris Paul is obviously not an inconsistent playmaker. He's a point guard, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm curious to see what it looks like when you get like Chris Paul, Steph, maybe you got Wiggins and Kuminga, two hyper athletic wings, and Dario Saric, stretch five. Like, what is that lineup? What are those type of things like? Because I think they'll blow people out offense. Like maybe, a little slow in the backcourt. Maybe I wouldn't want that backcourt guarding a John Morant, but like not that many teams you're playing that can really expose that sort of lineup. So I'm kind of excited to see some of the combinations they could run with Steph and CP together.
What is your biggest concern about like him coming in?
It's not as much him because I don't really think he's going to be as much of a like people think that they're just going to hate each other. I'm like every CP.
He said all the right things on like
every CP3 team does well year one. It tends to be like year 2, 3 where he grades on you a little bit, but everyone gets a little initial bump there. And again, if it's like a Westbrook Lakers experience where it's just like, oh, this isn't going to work, they'll get rid of him in 3 months in February. So that would not be ideal, of course, but there's an easy out there, right? The thing that concerns me is the thing that anyone would say at the Warriors: do they have enough size in general? Forget Chris Paul next to Steph. Just like a lot of this roster hinges on Jonathan Kuminga actually taking a step as opposed to being like a theoretical player who has these exciting flashes. If he takes a step, that's another 6'8" wing. That's like your Harrison Barnes type. And then you can, they're still undersized, but it's kind of a Warriors-y thing between Wiggins, Klay, Draymond. You throw Kuminga in there. That's a lot of wings to mess with, right? If he doesn't come around, I just don't know what their best lineup combinations are because we know Draymond and Looney don't work well together in most playoff matchups. Like you can't play those two against AD, for example. He just won't guard both of them, and then he'll get back and cover them if they ever try to shoot the ball in any capacity. They need to kind of find a way to find that fifth guy to go with, Steph, Klay, Wiggins, and whichever the two bigs that playing.
Yeah, I mean, and Kuminga feels like, because that would have been my biggest question. I know a lot of people like, well, can the Warriors play as fast as they want to if Chris Paul's on the floor? And I was like, even if he's not actually in front of the break, like he knows how to trail it and get the ball moving. Mine was just like, what are those? You mentioned Steph Curry and Chris Paul. It tantalizes me on offense. I just don't like, what is that? How do you build out the optimal defensive lineup around them? And it feels like Jonathan Kuminga is mission critical to maybe doing that, especially if you're mentioning, well, let's not have Draymond Green on the court at all times during those minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Kuminga is the question mark in the theoretical top 8, 9 of their rotation. Like Dario Saric is going to come in and be the player he's been, which is a solid backup big, right? We know what he's doing. Looney, we know what he's doing. Like we know what those guys are doing. Kuminga is the one swing piece where it's like, he hasn't really proven it in the NBA. He's had some stretches where you're like, I think he might be good. But he hasn't done it with consistency. He obviously got benched in the playoffs. That felt more disciplinary at times. That felt more like Steve trying to get him to buy in than like a matchup thing. But all roads kind of lead back to him as their one development gamble.
So when you're looking at him, if we look back on this season, and it is the breakout campaign for Jonathan Kuminga, if you were to finish this sentence, Jonathan Kuminga broke out because, like, what is the one or maybe even two things that you'll be watching the most closely about how he fits and fares within this rotation?
Rebounding. That's the one.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. I think I would like to say his jump shot, but I don't think it's realistic to expect him to be a great shooter yet by any, or even just like a confident one. What they need him to do is be a guy who can use his athleticism to make effort plays, and rebounding is the one they continue to focus on with him. So if he becomes a more aggressive, remember 2 years ago in the playoffs, Andrew Wiggins started rebounding like crazy, and we're all like, huh? Where's that been for 7 years, right? But like that was what they needed. That's kind of what I'm looking at with Kuminga. Can he do what Andrew Wiggins did, what Harrison Barnes did. Can he be that type of wing? We're not going to run isolations for you, but your presence is felt by hitting an open shot, cutting and, dunking the ball off Steph's gravity and rebounding and making the little plays. That's kind of what they want from him. And that's been the issue the past 2 years, where he sees himself as, a guy who gets the ball in his hands and doing certain things. It's in some ways, it's really reminiscent of kind of young Andrew Wiggins. So
it felt like, at least when I was watching them, there were more of those little defensive plays from him, even if sometimes it probably took him out of position to get rebounds, which is a focus that but so that's encouraging. Are they prepared? Because you mentioned this, there's an urgency just because Steph is Steph right now, but you look at this roster makeup, it does seem like they're prepared to give him a longer rope this year, or at least I don't want to limit his freedom to fail, but it feels like there's a really big belief that he is going to make that leap into consistency this season.
My read on the way they built the roster out is we're bringing in a lot of low maintenance, no nonsense veterans. Corey Joseph comes to mind, just 10-year pro, he good locker room guy. He's going to help the younger players. They brought GP2 back, beloved, ultimate teammate, would never complain. If he gets a DMP 3 games in a row, he's still going to be doing the good teammate stuff. Dario, they brought in a bunch of those guys. And in some ways, it's because last year they over-indexed going young. And the other way you can look at it is, if you want to give a guy like Kuminga the space to succeed, surrounding him with those type of guys is going to be way more beneficial for him. I think Rudy Gay is going to end up getting the last roster spot they have. And I think he's going to be getting it mostly because they view him as the guy who can be in Kuminga's ear and help him. And just all these, good teammate, veteran, bench guy things. I think that's really what they're betting on. And they're trying to insulate it where it's we can get it out of him because we're going to build a very adult professional team.
The Klay Thompson stuff, are we supposed to really read anything into the whole, will he be defending some power forwards? What is it actually changing about what he did defensively last year, which was still miles away from how they were using him defensively a few years ago? So I don't understand why there's all of a sudden this uproar on social media about it.
Steve I think he knew exactly what he was doing. So he knew it'd get you say power forward, it makes people think he's going to be defending Karl Malone that even exists in the NBA. He's a wing. He's going to be guarding bigger wings. That's what they want from him. I think we all know he's not going to be guarding point guards anymore, right?
Right.
Klay's best attribute is his strength defensively. He can muscle up with an Aaron Gordon. He can muscle up a Kawhi Leonard as well as any wing can. He's strong. But if he's going to be the guy guarding those type of wings, there has to be a little more focus on off-ball defense, a little more awareness in terms of being a help defender, and just you got to help a little more on the glass too. No one's asking Klay to become a 10 rebound per game guy, but you can't have it can't be Klay of the early years of the dynasty where it's 25 points, 1 assist, 2 rebounds. I need a little more out of you there, and I think that's what he means by power forward. Power forward, it's essentially you're not going to be on ball. You're going to be off ball. So I need you to actually be a help defender. I need you to not fall asleep off ball. I need you to box out off ball. Those sort of things. And when you talk about it that way, you're you know what? Those are reasonable asks. Those are reasonable asks. But when you say he's going to play power forward, people's minds go to, oh no, he has to guard Giannis one-on-one.
Right.
Come on, man.
Is there any does he have to do anything different offensively? Not even just this season, but as he's getting older, because it felt like last year he shot the hell out of the ball for a lot of the season, but there were just these wild swings from him. And then it felt like he reverted to some of the, I'm automatically going to shoot, or I'm going to try and put the ball on the floor. Is there anything he needs to just change? Yeah. Be smarter. That's what it is.
I think the big takeaway, the Lakers series, obviously that's the worst playoff series I've seen him play. He was, he tried to Talk about Game 6 Klay and then goes out 3 for 19. It was kind of a shitty way to go out. I think, he's not going to turn into a pick and roll playmaker. I don't think they're going to start posting him up like Mark Jackson's running the offense again. Maybe here and there, but he is good at it. But it's I don't know how many post fadeaways a game do you really need, right? I think it's more just about recognition, being a little more of a decoy, understanding when you actually have 4 feet of space versus a guy right in your face. Klay thinks he can hit a shot on anyone because he's proven he can hit a shot on anyone.
Right.
And that leads to him going, kind of like the Kobe stereotype of like shooting with 3 hands in your face. Like, just do less of that and they'll be fine. Because even if he's 34 next spring, even if he's older than that, no one's leaving him wide open, right? So
Right.
if he's willing to just use his gravity to open up stuff to get Wiggins a dunk or stuff like that, like he's still an effective offensive player.
There's a little bit of a pointless question because I don't think either way he leaves, but would you bet for or against there being a Klay extension? Because it seemed like he was pretty open to it. I think he just talked to Anthony Slater, the Athletic, and it seemed like he was pretty much all for an extension.
He talked to Slater, and when I saw that, when I listened to the way he actually said it, I was like, damn, he kind of sounds like he's like asking for a contract. Like, it's not like him being like, I want a max, and the Warriors being like, no. It seems like it's kind of like Warriors aren't offering him a contract. It's like, guys, I don't want that much, that type of thing. I said on my show, I'm betting against it being signed before the season. I think the Warriors want the optionality in the season, like him and CP3 is expiring and see what's going on there. But I do think he will be re-signed next offseason. I just think it's gonna be one of those things where they probably don't come together in the next week, and that's fine. He'll play it out. He'll get extended. That's just my guess. Andy, my co-host, thinks the other way. He's like, the way he's talking, it sounds like a guy who's willing to sign. If he gets offered what Draymond got offered, he wants to sign it just to play it safe right now. So.
Would you, if you're the team, just removing what he emotionally means to this franchise, like, do you pounce at that if he's willing to sign like the Draymond type deal, or maybe even for a little less?
I think you have to, because I just don't see that as a contract that's toxic for you,
Right.
Like taking all emotion out of it, which you kind of have to do. The decision the Warriors need to make is, are we willing to give up flexibility? Are we willing to give up the flexibility that not extending Klay gives us? Like, I don't know. What if Joel Embiid becomes open and we want to be players in something like that? It's better to have expiring contracts than a newly, inked up guy for 4 or 5 years who's older, right? That sort of thing. And I'm not saying they would trade Klay even if he did come available, but it seems like they're valuing the fact that, if this doesn't work the way we want it to, we can pivot to a new era of Steph or next to someone else without a Klay or a Wiggins or something like that. But back to your point, I mean, it's hard if he's willing to take 20 to 25, given the market, like that makes him the 80th highest paid player in the NBA or something dumb like that.
It's like 14 to 15% of like the salary cap moving forward. Like that's what the number would just settle into, and probably less if it's at like either if it's a declining rate or a steady rate.
I mean, that's Lonzo Ball, Marcus Smart, Dylan Brooks, Malcolm Brogdon, Norm Powell money, Keldon Johnson money. I don't think that's a number that it's pretty team. Even as he gets older, that's how much Bojan Bogdanovic makes. That's Evan Fournier money. I just think if you, well, I'm not saying all those are great contracts, but you know what I'm saying. Like I can't see the Warriors passing up if he's willing to go that low on that number.
Andrew Wiggins was kind of all over the place after the adductor injury, and then his dad was sick and he was absent from the team. Do we read anything like long-term into the kind of that inconsistency roller coaster specifically on offense, or is it just let's chalk it up to the hellfire that was last season?
I think you're correct. I think last year was a miserable season for him. He had an injury. He's been pretty durable his whole career. But he was injured, then he had a family matter, and he ended up playing only 46 games, something like that, right? A really low number. I think that's another reason I'm quasi bullish on this team, because I think he bounces back. Maybe he'll never hit the highs he hit in the 2022 playoffs ever again. But there's a lot of room between that guy and just the no-show guy last year. He's very comfortable in their system. The role is tailor-made for him, where he never has to dribble the ball. He gets to use that he gets to do the things he's really good at. And then there are moments where he gets to take over because teams are triple teaming Steph Curry. And next thing you know, Wiggins has 22 points on mostly like open catch and shoots and like cuts, right? Like those type of things. So I think he bounces back. I also think it's not that hard for him to bounce back in this Warriors system because the role fits him. That's why I keep saying Kuminga is the swing piece, because he's the only one they're asking to do something no one's technically actually seen him do to date.
So, and also, by the way, a down season for him now where it's like, okay, the defense was mostly there and he still shot almost 40% from 3 on 7 attempts per 36 minutes. Like that's,
I mean, I would say the down season is he didn't play, and then when he came back in the playoffs, he couldn't hit any threes because, well, he hadn't played for an extended period of time and there's rust there. Right. But yeah, like to your point, if you look at his per minute numbers in the games he played in the regular season, it looks the exact same as the year before I was praising him about, right?
Right. The other thing that is fascinating about this team, to me anyway, what is Moses Moody's role this year? And what will you be watching just most closely for when because even last year felt like, I don't know, I don't want to call it feel, but it felt like he just fit and worked. And that's
what made it frustrating that he had an extended period where he was out of the rotation in favor of Anthony Lamb. I kind of thought he was going to establish himself in the rotation last year, and things just didn't break for him that way. I do agree with you. He has a level of feel, and like he should be an easy plug and play player for them. I think he's going to be another shooter off the bench, another guy who's long, who can guard multiple positions on defense, another guy who competes pretty hard. I wouldn't be surprised if he pushed himself above 20-ish minutes a game and they used him a lot and it kind of let them keep Klay's minutes lower. But yeah, I mean, he is kind of the buried one of the topic because I'm spending so much time on Kuminga, right?
I mean, and it's also just like Kuminga's not, I know he can guard wings, but like when you're talking about offense, like Kuminga isn't necessarily like a wing on offense. Like you have Wiggins, and then
he's kind of like the roll man. He does a lot of the pass, Kuminga cut for a dunk, that sort of stuff. So
right, and so having that, if you're going to start Klay and Andrew Wiggins, having like that secondary wing come off the bench is, I mean, pretty important. So, So you think he's going to play consistently over 20 minutes a game this year?
I'm penciling him at like 18-ish, but I would not be surprised if he got all the way up to like 25-ish minutes a game. When you start naming all the names that are going to have to play in this rotation, it is a quasi-deep roster. Now, we might have thought that a year ago, but, young players turn the opposite way. And next thing you know, you're like, we don't have anyone we trust, so could go either way. But I think there's opportunity for him to kind of be the bench unit shooter. Does that make sense?
Right. And I don't mean to disparage Gary Payton by not calling him Gary Payton II by not calling him a wing. I don't know what he would be classified as, like a center guard. I don't really know what to call him.
I mean, I kind of think what the Warriors want Kuminga to do is just do what GP2 does, but be 6 inches taller. That's like literally what they want. It's like play defense, use your athleticism to be a ball hawk, and then just like use athleticism to be kind of the 5-man on offense. And, no one really knows, but we didn't run any plays for you, but you got 12 points in 15 minutes type of thing. It's there if he can figure it out. A lot of that's just GP being really intuitive, though.
Speaking of quasi-depth, Steve Kerr seems in love with pods on both ends of the floor, which is not something I saw coming.
I was just looking at a quote. Yeah.
There's no chance he like plays a real role in this team, but do you have any general early impressions of his game, what he could be, how he might be useful down the line to this team?
I think there's a reasonable chance he helps them eat regular season minutes this year. He's a rookie. I will be shocked if he plays meaningful minutes in a playoff series at any point this year. But the thing Steve keeps pointing out to, and it showed in the first preseason game, is he's really quick mentally. He like completely understands what to do. And Steve's going to fall in love with you if you're thinking one play ahead at all times, like that's just his type of player. And honestly, if it keeps translating, he will throw him out there a little bit. Like Steve Kerr is not afraid to play guys who have high feel and are good passers, regardless of their size, regardless of what combinations. Like we know he's up to that sort of thing. Right. So I don't know. It's been fun to see a rookie who kind of has the opposite skill set of the last few rookies they drafted. Like Pods he's not undersized, but he's not particularly big, and he's not a particularly impressive athlete by NBA standards. But he has incredibly high feel and like a lot of touch. So it's like they had to go the complete opposite way of the players they drafted the last couple of years.
I don't have any Draymond or Steph Curry questions, but we have to talk about them because they're Draymond and Steph Curry. Do we see do you have any new thoughts or concerns about either of these players? Do you expect, even with Draymond and Chris Paul, you mentioned CP3 playing with Steph, do we maybe see instances where the Warriors try to go full bore and maximize those non-Steph minutes and see a lot of Draymond and CP3 together? I know they're reluctant at times to stagger Draymond and Steph, but how do you view maybe those two, CP3 and Draymond, operating together?
I think they can. I think it'll be interesting because Draymond is kind of the point guard when he's on the floor. Some of that's because he doesn't really have a role if he doesn't have the ball in his hands. But they do so much, rip and run off the rebound because he trusts Draymond to make decisions, go straight into a DHO, and then just let Steph cook, that sort of stuff. It'd be interesting to see how he plays with Chris Paul more from a pace perspective, because Draymond's mentality is like run, right? He's not a half-court offensive guy, so he's trying to get the team into transition as much as possible. Chris Paul is the opposite. I'm going to slow it down, and I'm going to make the right play, and because that's how I like to play, right? So I don't know. It'll be. I'm curious to see how those two team together, because on the one hand, they're both so smart that something has to work with the two of them. On the other hand, just on paper, the fit's awful.
Right. But you almost want to see it or experiment with it, because if there's any chance of you having that optionality and higher leverage moments, it can't always just be about staggering, because the minutes that matter, you technically want all your best players on the court. Maybe that ends up being the 5-man unit with Looney and CP3 just on the bench, and it's Wiggins and Klay Thompson are in there with them. But I'm hoping they do you anticipate them experimenting a bunch with sort of some of these different lineup and stagger patterns to see what they really have in the CP3 fit?
Yeah, I do think it's possible that I know they're going to experiment in the early season. I know we're going to see some Steve Kerr lineups where you're like, I don't know, man. I don't know about that one. I don't know, but it's, better to do that stuff early than later, right? So I don't know. Steve Kerr's kind of a madman. Sometimes he throws out, a lineup where the tallest player is 6'5", and you're like, what are we doing right now? We just saw him play Mikal Bridges at center in FIBA ball. So, he's not afraid to zig, right?
So how big of a loss do you view as Bob Myers to this organization, and what level of trust do you have in Mike Dunleavy Jr. and also Kirk Lacob of we're going to be more than just ride out this goodwill that we have from the 4 championships, and we're really going to try and maximize what we have left of this. It's not just the best player in franchise history. He's probably one of the 10 greatest players of all time.
Yeah.
He's still in his prime window.
Yeah. I mean, I have as much faith as one could reasonably expect to have, given it happened in May. Mike Dunleavy was his right-hand man, and so was Kirk Lacob. A lot of the Warriors' decisions are kind of consensus brain trust decisions. They're not like a one-man operation. This isn't I'm trying to think of a good example. Like Daryl Morey tends to just kind of everything goes through him, right? Type of thing. They don't operate. It's a consensus type of thing with the Warriors. So I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to argue with the results during Bob's tenure, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see how this goes. But in terms of first off season and moves, they're saying all the right things. I like the moves that they made. They also didn't paint themselves into a corner with aggressive gambles. Yes, Chris Paul is weird, but there's a very easy pivot off it. You know what I'm saying? So it's I kind of like what they did, and I'm willing to let it play out a little bit before making a definitive decision.
And do you think, and you've kind of alluded to this, but I want to make sure that I'm not misquoting you here, that they have the guts, the gall to, if a midseason opportunity arises, whether or not Chris Paul's being a good fit, that they would make that kind of a shakeup if the right player becomes available, rather than kind of playing it safe?
I do. And I think that could potentially be the biggest shift between this front office and the Bob Myers one. Bob is very, what's the word I want to say? Bob's Bob's pragmatic. He's not a guy who's going to like wholesale half his roster at the trade deadline. He's a big, like, let's see it play out. Let's move this slowly. Let's not try to panic, that sort of thing. Now, I'm not saying Dunleavy's like going to panic trade left and right, but I do get the impression he's going to be a little more aggressive. And yeah, if the worst case scenario for the Warriors happens where Chris Paul and Draymond are just not working and this and that, I do think he'd trade Chris Paul at the trade deadline. I do think he would just be like, it's not working. You're on. This is the business, you know? I mean, he said, I'm not trading Jordan Poole. What do you mean? We want him here forever, and trade him 2 days later. You know?
Yeah.
And he was pretty steady about it. He's kind of, this has been brought up to me, but it's like, he's a lifer. He's been traded himself multiple times. Right. He's kind of he's desensitized to like that side of the business. So I don't think he would hesitate to act if he thought it made the team better.
There's also, they have a sneaky, like, they can still trade a couple firsts in their swaps, and there's Kuminga and there's Moody. Sure. There's the CP3 experiment. Like, they have a sneaky, they're not going to outbid everybody, but like they still have real stuff to move without touching their
particularly
core.
When you look at like Steph's age, if they want to put some of those later picks on the table, there's gonna be some teams just like, man, are they gonna be good when Steph's 40? You know, like a lot of, you know, like kind of just what you saw with the Bucks trade, right? Like that is a bet against the Bucks future that Portland made, you know, and it could be a fair one given the ages of the guys when they get there, you know? So they do have stuff, and I think the expiring contracts are a big piece of that too. So I think they're open to it. I just think, having seen how they operate, they're not trading picks in 2028, 2030, like that sort of stuff, unless it gets a guy who they think can reasonably be a bridge with Steph. Like that, like it would have to.
It's not going to be like, oh, we're going all in on OG Anunoby type deal.
Exactly. And apparently that's what Masai wants for OG. So yeah, exactly. It's got to be like, we're getting a true number 2 star with Steph for one.
We are entering the cookie cutter portion of the podcast now. Are there any strengths or weaknesses that we haven't discussed that are maybe flying under the radar or not being talked enough about with regards to this team?
I think everyone thinks they're going to be too small. So I don't know that weaknesses are being under discussed. I don't think enough is being put into how terrible their bench units have been when Steph's off the floor. And Chris Paul at 38 should be able to command a net neutral bench. And they have a good combination of players to go with it. I kind of think they're being slept on in how many wins they can potentially just rack up in the regular season. Playoffs could be a different animal because I'm not sure if they have the 5-man units they've had in the past that you can trust. But I just don't think enough is being
reliable. That starting 5 last year was when they played together was statistically a killer.
It is, and it's good, and it's also like, you know, it doesn't work against specific teams because of Looney and Draymond's offensive limitations. Right. But like against the field, it racks up wins. So I don't know. I feel like it's being slept on how much Chris Paul can actually help the bench and just contribute to wins. Like they should win 50 games.
Do you think that they're going to change, not like overhaul the way that they're used to playing, but like, are we going to see more of like maybe a traditional offense when Chris Paul's running point on his own, or is he really going to be kind of grossed into the way that the Warriors want to play?
I think they're gonna make him play the way the Warriors want to play when he's playing with Steph and Klay, and there's just so much stuff that they do that you'd be foolish not to have him figure out how to work in that system, right? But I think when it's backup units with no Steph on the floor, they might go with the traditional CP double drag screen offense and just make Kuminga the roll man and Saric and just like, look, man, we don't need to reinvent the wheel when Steph's not out there. Go with what works. It'll be steady, defend, get some high percentage shots, and boom, throw Steph back in there and cause chaos.
When you're looking at sort of the 10-man rotation, the top 10 guys who are going to play, does it feel like there are just 10 locks for this? Like it's just, you have the top 6, there's CP3, and then we go right into, well, Gary Payton II, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Dario Saric. Like, do you expect if Rudy Gay makes the roster to actually crack that top 10 type thing, or is anyone else?
No, I think you're right. I think the reality is Steph's going to miss a handful of games. Chris Paul miss a handful of games. And, you know, that's where the Corey Josephs of the world come in. That's where maybe Podziemski gives them a little thing here and there. That's where Rudy Gay can give him some minutes because Draymond maybe is, missing a few games here or there. And that's how those guys can get their minutes. Like, end of the day, 4 of their top 6 are over 30, and 2 of those guys are over 35. There's going to be games missed. There's going to be precautionary rest, even though Adam Silver says we shouldn't do it anymore. And there's going to be opportunities for the rest of the roster. But to your point, fully healthy, locked in, playing the Nuggets, playing the Lakers, games they want to have. I don't expect them to go much deeper than those guys.
I'm going to put you on the spot because you've already mentioned a lot of this will be matchup dependent. We fast forward to the end of this year. What ends up being their most used crunch time unit?
I think it's going to be the one that everyone expects, which is Chris Paul in the hyper small ball unit. I think it's going to be Steph. You're talking about just what's the most used crunch time lineup, right?
Yeah, just like high stakes moments. And I know they can do a bunch of different things, but like what's going to end up being the 5-man
Steph, Chris Paul, Klay, Wiggins, Draymond, which is tiny.
Right.
But I think they're going to go with that in those 3 minutes left. We need to take this game home. Let's get them out there.
My Galaxy brain was, I feel like, could it be Looney, Draymond, Wiggins, Paul, and Steph? But the idea of having in a playoff game and it's crunch time and Klay just on the bench just feels dirty. So I wouldn't be able to go with that one. But that was the one that I kind of thought a lot about.
I do think we're going to see games this year where Klay doesn't close. We'll see games where they go with Looney instead of Draymond. We won't see games where Steph doesn't close. I'll put it that way.
Well, that would be stupid.
I think we'll see I think we'll see every other guy of that, big 6 be on the bench for crunch time at some point this season. And I actually get the feeling that that's kind of Steve wants that to happen. He wants them to close a game with Klay on the bench once just to be like, you're important, but we can win other ways. Wants to close once with Chris Paul on the bench just so he understands it's not, it's not 2017 where you're the point guard or something like that,
Yeah.
And on down the line, close without Draymond because Looney's a better matchup against Sabonis or something, just because, hey, that's what we want to do. I do expect there to be my biggest take is they're not going to have a consistent starting or closing lineup. It's going to be the same 7 or 8 guys, but they're going to rotate them a lot. Though I wouldn't be surprised if they started Kuminga for random games and they went with the Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond lineup. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. So I just think there's a lot of, I won't say opportunity, but I think that they're going to be a little more mix and match heavy than they're traditionally.
If they're going to be that experimental, this actually makes this question have some substance when it normally doesn't. What is a weirdo lineup? Maybe they won't try it, but you think that they should?
I want to see Steph. I want to see the one I said earlier. I'll keep it simple. Steph, CP, Wiggins, Kuminga, Saric.
Okay.
You got the 2 hyper wings, the stretch 5 who can pass and do kind of the Bogut, Bielitsa, be kind of a hub of offense from the elbow. Big. You got CP and Steph together. I don't know. It could be a lot of fun.
I just want to see the Steph plus kids lineup. Just let's throw the 2 timeline out there. So that's Kuminga, Moody, Pods, Steph, and I'm just going to throw, he's on a 2-way. I just want Usman Garuba out there. I'm in love with Usman Garuba still. I don't care.
I would not be surprised if he got his way into the rotation. He's a Warriors-y player. We'll see if he develops fast enough, but the skill set fits how the Warriors want to play for sure.
I celebrated every corner 3 he hit last year. So I'll be all about that. No, it's interesting. We just did our over-unders pods for the league. The Warriors total moved down since we did it. It was only 2 days ago. It's at 47.5 right now. Would you take the over or the under on that?
I'll take the over. I think they won 44 games last year. And they swapped a bunch of malcontents for Chris Paul, who tends to rack up wins. I think they'll be a safe bet for 48 wins if they stay reasonably healthy in general. Let me put it this way. They're either going to win over 48 or they're going to win under 38. That's my prediction. I think they're either Father Time's catching up and there's going to be a lot of injuries and that sort of type of season, which I don't want to happen, but it's always a possibility, right? Or they're going to be a normal NBA team with, maybe Steph plays 63 games, maybe Chris Paul plays 60 games, like nothing substantial, but nothing that terrible either. And I think given the veteran upgrades they made, that's probably a team that gets you close to 50 wins, maybe even mid 50s, but I feel 48's a safe bet.
This question has been interesting this year because of how wide open the West is. I'm looking at just the regular season because playoffs a different animal. Are there any teams that you would guarantee to have a better record than the Warriors in the West right now?
Yeah. Denver. I think Denver's combination of they're the defending champions. Every one of their core players is younger than the Warriors core player. They're all in the perfect age sweet spot where I'm not concerned about health. And they just rack up wins, man. I would be very surprised if Denver isn't a top 2 seed again.
Oh yeah, I'd be shocked.
Other than that, I don't know. Phoenix should be a flamethrower, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were kind of like the Warriors, where it's unclear about how many of them are sitting in lineup every night, that sort of thing. And then everyone else, I don't know. I could paint a case for 2 being the 2 seed or the play-in for eight teams in the West, and the Warriors are one of those teams. So
I think I have more faith in the Suns than you do. I think there's a clear top 2 and everything else is wide open. Sam, I know you have to go. Can you just tell our listeners where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
Yeah, Sam Sfandiari. You can find me on Twitter. Check out the Light Years Pod, Apple, Spotify, all pod players. And yeah, appreciate you, Dan.
Appreciate you as well. Thanks as always for coming on. I will talk to you soon.